G'day there and welcome to part 3 of the Private Militia series inside of the Utopian Realism series. In part 1 we went over private decentralized militia, the overview, the pros and cons versus the monopoly versus a private free society version of militia. Then in the previous second video we looked at ranked leadership and organization, and now we are going to look at weapons and defense against threats. So if you haven't watched those previous videos, go back and watch them so this all makes sense. If there are bans or general laxity on military advancement, do you know what will happen? If there are bans or general laxity, what will happen is what always does. The good guys stop advancing, the bad guys race ahead, achieve technological superiority, and conquer the inferior nations. This is the story of most primitive tribes in history. Just think about the Spanish coming to South America and conquering those lands. Think about the English and their empire, the Romans, and think about the settlers going to Australia and the indigenous Aboriginal tribes. And just that's the story forever, and it always will be, always, forever, for all of reality's infinite existence. That's just the way it is. So that's why the good guys must have the best weapons. You have to. You can't have laxity. It's like when people question and they say, oh, there's a terrible school shooting, and obviously that's terrible, but how do you stop that? It's not by taking away the good guys' guns. That's the dumbest thing you can possibly do. You need more guys, good guys with guns, and then you can stop bad guys or psychopaths or whoever these crazy kids are, whatever, that are shooting up the schools. You need more guns. That's how you solve this. You don't just say, you know what, let's only give criminals guns, because that's what you're saying. You're saying, let's just arm amateur criminals because they're going to get the guns regardless, and let's give the biggest, most violent, dominating, tyrannical gang, the police, let's give them weapons. So only those two rogue elements can have weapons. Just the really big gang and the amateurs, the professionals and the amateur bad guys. That is so stupid. No, you need more good guys need guns, and big guns too, to make it a level playing field. Otherwise, the bad guys always win. Always. We have that evidence. It's a fact. It's not opinion. To prevent a peaceful nation being conquered by a hostile one, weapons ownership from rocket launchers to tanks and F-22s, it's a fighter jet, is openly available to all individuals in utopian realism. Self-defense and property ownership is a right at the individual level. Of course, there are measurements in place to ensure safety and prevent accidents with such destructive weapons and vehicles. Companies who sell handguns, machine guns, or aircraft carriers all require a certificate of competency and psych eval before completing the sale. So a psychological evaluation, I just abbreviate a lot, make it easier instead of repeating it 50 times. And so this is to ensure whoever is purchasing the weapon or vehicle has the competence required to operate it appropriately. If you want to buy a machine gun, just go to a private security company or militia, whoever's offering the course, pay some money, they'll teach you how to use it, there you go. Now you've got a certificate of competency to handle a machine gun. You'll need a different one for a sniper rifle, for handguns, not for every single 50,000 different types of handguns, but just handguns, assault rifles, machine guns, snipers, rocket launchers, javelins, tanks, jets, whatever weapon or vehicle you're buying, you need to know how to use it safely, and then you need that psychological eval to be mentally fit. The standards are much higher in utopian realism than they are currently in most countries. A man may know how to use a weapon competently, but may not be psychologically fit to wield it. I could almost guarantee you do mental profiles on the psychological fitness of most police, they wouldn't pass. They can't. They're not fit to be wielding those weapons, most of them. And that's being generous when I'm saying most. Because how else can you possibly work for a tyrannical monopoly, like for evil incarnate? This is also why psych evals are crucial. They're crucial when selling powerful weapons. The customer must be deemed mentally stable to complete the transaction. The psychologist could be held accountable if they provide dodgy certificates and their client commits a violent crime. For example, someone wants to get a gun, and they might go to a first psychologist and they say, no, you're not fit. And then they go to a second person and they say, yes, okay, you are. So you do have that option. It's not just one psychologist. You've got tens of thousands of different psychologists, but those psychologists want to make sure that they're doing their job properly and not giving away dodgy certificates. Because if anything does happen, if you do end up being some crazy person and harm a lot of people, then the liability could fall back, potentially, depending upon thorough investigation. If that psychologist was found to be negligent, then they could be accountable and could be sued, which they don't want. So they'd want to be doing their tests of people's mental fitness very thoroughly and making sure that it is authentic. Yes, okay, I said that. All right. So let's examine a worst possible scenario. I also want to add, I actually had ChatGPT help me with this because I had all these ideas and I was just like, how do I overcome these problems? I can see what I've got in my mind. I've got this basic structure. So I said, hey, ChatGPT, I want you to make an argument for me that is supporting private individuals' rights to own any and all kind of weapons and vehicles. And I said I also want a list of what the critics would say against that. And it gives me 5 dot points for each side. And then I said, okay, now provide answers for each of those critics' responses. And it came up with some really good stuff. And I took that and I modified it, tweaked it. I think I made it better, and I put it in here. So I wanted to share that because you can use these AI tools in your favor. You just need to know how to use them, make them work for you. There's no need to fear AI, as some people go bonkers, just fearing a clever calculator, and even calling it a clever calculator is an overstatement. So let's look at that worst case scenario. A man buys an F-35 fighter jet from Lockheed Martin without any paperwork to prove his competency or mental health. I think it's Lockheed Martin that make F-35s, so I might be wrong there. He had just gone through a breakup and is depressed. He decides to fly over Melbourne or any city and bombs it to hell before nosediving into the Rialto. Rialto, that was the tallest building in Melbourne before the Eureka. I grew up in Melbourne area, so I know this. Obviously, this case would be catastrophic and must be prevented, obviously. So where does the fault lie? Well, Lockheed Martin, the company selling weapons, and I call vehicles super weapons, shouldn't have sold a fighter jet to a mentally unsound man. They can and will be sued into oblivion by the survivors. By ensuring that customers possess the relevant documents declaring proficiency and stability, it's far less likely that a worst case event occurs. Most people have cars, and cars can be weaponized, but very rarely are. And so that actually really helped for me to wrap my head around, because I was thinking, damn, I support individual rights, but if everyone has a fighter jet, which not everyone is going to have a fighter jet, but there could be a big potential for harm, couldn't there, if people have these jets? And I'm like, well, how many people have cars? Most people. That is a weapon. But how often are they weaponized? Very, very rarely to almost never. I was like, interesting. And the same thing, even with light aircraft or helicopters, that could be weaponized, but how often is it? Almost never. The more deadly the weapon, like tanks, jets, and ships, the more expensive they are, meaning the less people will have access to them. And what this does is it creates a fine balance between having powerful defense, decentralized across a nation, and limiting access to anyone and everyone. It's a Goldilocks zone. In today's monopolized system, it's only those who work for a tyrannical, thieving, untrustworthy, warmongering, centralized add in monopolized again, I love that word, monopolized military who have access to superweapons. And that's true. The threat of mental instability is far less worrisome in comparison to the threat of unjust orders. Because, I'll read this. It's not mental breakdowns we should be worrying about so much, but blind obedience. That is the threat to our freedom, civility, peace and order. The quote, "I was just following orders," is responsible for far more death and destruction than "I had a mental breakdown" ever will. Members of monopolized militaries are not immune to mental health challenges either, as evidenced by their higher suicide rates compared to the civilian population. On more expensive sales for superweapons, such as ships, tanks, or aircraft, a number of years' worth of psychological checkups are included. For instance, if you purchase an F-35, you get 20 years' worth of included biannual mental checkups. This practice will ensure that only those mentally fit are able to keep such powerful weapons. If an owner of a superweapon is deemed unfit, they'll have their property confiscated by private security in alliance with weapons retailers and returned once they recover. So if they're deemed unfit, the weapons get taken away by other people who are mentally fit. They look after them. That person recovers, gets better, goes and takes another psych eval, proves, yes, I'm okay, I went through this situation, I've recovered, I've got better now, which is very common, that's normal, and then they can get their weapons back, no problem. This practice of regular checkups is only required for superweapons, not portable man-held weapons. Superweapons are typically classified as fighting vehicles. That's my classification. In conjunction with safe sales and checkups, regulations will prohibit military vehicles from being used in particular zones without prior permission from property owners. For example, owners of military aircraft are not permitted to fly over cities or densely populated areas. Unless, of course, they have lots of permissions to do something like that beforehand, or there's some reason, like they're shooting down enemy fighters, for instance. But if they do so without the correct prior permissions, they can be shot down by the city's defences. And cities should have defences, which is very uncommon, but big buildings should have anti-aircraft cannons on top and laser defence systems, etc. Because we know what humans are like. Warmongering. And you have to have all these defences to defend the peaceful and the good. You just have to have them. It's like, that's what a lot of martial artists do. They become very skilled and trained in hand-to-hand combat. So then when they're on the street, they don't need to use those skills because they're confident enough to deter any would-be assailants. It's the same principle here. By allowing all individuals to access and own the most powerful military equipment, the threat of foreign invasion significantly decreases. And you have to realize, look at history. Invasion is a huge factor. It's happened to every country. Which country has never been invaded? Most countries have probably been invaded, had wars in the past 500 years. Every country would have at least once. And if you want to, if 500 years is too big of a timeline, break it down to even 100 years. How many wars have there been in the past 100 years? Oh, if you start looking into that, you'll probably get depressed. But that's why you need a good system like that to protect whatever country you're in. This is not just for Australia, not just for America. This is for China. This is for South Korea, North Korea. This is for every single country in the world because this is a system of reason. And then if theoretically we actually had every country in the world, well, no one's going to want to invade anyone anymore. It's just simply a fool's errand for a centralized military to attack a utopian realism nation. Not only would they face resistance from every town and city, but its defenders have professional training and the most advanced armaments money can buy. If individuals only have access to rifles and other small arms, then an invading air force or navy will tear them to pieces. That's why you need heavy guns, not just little. You need big guns and vehicles to protect yourself properly. Us together. But if individuals and militias have javelins, AA, anti-aircraft guns, laser defense systems, and their own jets and warships, then invading enemies won't have a choice but to be defeated. By decentralizing power and allowing all individuals access to weapons of their choice, it levels the playing field. Civil wars would also be far less likely. Why? Because there's no ruling monopoly to rebel against. The dominant threat and worst possible scenario in a utopian realism society would be if a group of thugs wished to form a new ruling dictatorship, i.e. government. That's the worst possible scenario that can ever happen. Well, up to all of history. Maybe something even worse could be imagined by evil psychopaths in the future, but to date, that's the worst possible thing that can ever happen is government. By spreading the power via individual weapons ownership and decentralized militia, the possibility of serious internal conflict is dramatically reduced. A people who know freedom, sovereignty, and independence, whilst being armed to the teeth, are a force to be reckoned with. Enslaving them to a new government ruling class is next to impossible. In reality, when bad groups or individuals want to commit crimes like mass shootings, assassinations, or forming governments, those bad guys get access to weapons, regardless of laws or regulatory prohibitions. The more powerful weapons in the hands of good guys, the better. The bad guys are going to have automatic weapons, etc. So it's nonsensical to restrict the good guys to only semi-automatic, for instance. Limiting the scale of weapons which the good guys can lawfully purchase and own is a recipe for disaster. You are just asking for trouble. To prevent school shootings, the teachers must carry weapons. To prevent or deter criminals from burgling homes, the owners must have weapons. Without a gun, a little old lady is no match for a burly man. With a gun, now they're on a closer playing field. When we look at countries like Switzerland, Norway, Finland, and Canada, all with high gun ownership but low crime, we can see that more weapons can and normally does equal more safety, not less. Although a lot of it, of course, is going to depend upon the education and culture, etc. The standards. Without a ruling monopoly, there's an abundance of wealthy individuals who keep each other in check. If you think there's a lot of wealthy individuals today, you have no idea how many wealthy individuals there would be without a ruling monopoly, and you'd probably be one of them. If any one of these wealthy individuals hire an army of thugs to conquer an area, opposing wealthy men and women can hire their own militia or mercenaries to defend and protect the innocent. Although, for what purpose would one conquer territory within their own nation? If they want more land or resources, they can just buy it. If they can afford a private army of mercenaries, they can afford to purchase what they really want. If someone does become a mad tyrant, which, of course, can and probably would happen even in utopian realism, let's be real here, militia from neighbouring regions can quickly respond. A wealthy individual wouldn't even need to hire and direct them. The militia who support objective law and rights would simply defend the innocent and destroy the wicked without a thought of monetary compensation. And even if they did ask for payment, it's a little thing in comparison to being conquered by an evil warlord. Other major threats include nuclear weapons, gases and poisons and nanobots, whatever else. Everyone has the right to build whatever weapons they like, with the relevant certificates, of course. But because there's a high risk of unintended catastrophe with those weapons, they must do so in secluded and safe areas. If someone is caught building dangerous weapons without their certificates, competency, and mental stability, then it's deemed an inchoate crime, which you should be familiar with from our video talking about objective law. They shall be prosecuted for that. If one has their certificates and is building weapons in a secure location, then they have the lawful right to. And this kind of behavior is not frowned upon, but appreciated. Enemies of freedom will always be doing the same. So it's apt that men of good spirit do it better. If owners of powerful firearms misuse their weapons, causing harm or damage and are found negligent in an objective court of law, they may have their weapons confiscated and be prohibited from holding any weapons again in the future. For example, if someone had just bought a Javelin missile launcher and then they go down the street and they're playing with it in a way they shouldn't and they accidentally blow something up, it's like, well, you did have your certificate of competency, you were deemed mentally stable, but you just did something really, really stupid. Like, that was dumb. And you probably shouldn't be having a weapon ever again. Though, if there are mitigating circumstances, hold on. If one proves they cannot be trusted to wield weapons with maturity, then they won't be trusted. If there are mitigating circumstances, appropriate retraining may be all that's necessary to remedy the situation. So it depends on how severe it is. This can be decided at the discretion of rational judges. And then I added in a little bit here. When customers purchase weapons, they're to record their identity and address with the weapons dealer. That's it. There's no need to register with third parties. This is just in case of a crime, so it makes investigation easier. And so I'm sure I will definitely add more into this. This is just all I've got at the moment without going overboard and writing a full book. I just want it to be very succinct and to the point. And as you can see, I covered many different points with very few words for each point. So there's a lot that's covered there. And hopefully you can understand all the principles behind my point of view, and you can see, wow. That word was like a wow crossed with a wow. A wow. This is just a fantastic system. I don't think there's ever been anything like it in the world, and I think if countries actually started to adopt this, or individuals and then larger and larger groups adopted this, it would be game-changing, provided it's, of course, in line with everything else in utopian realism. It can only work when people have the right philosophy, when there's the right system of laws and privatization and capitalization or capitalism, and that's all working together harmoniously in sync. That's when this works, and it works, well, I think theoretically it can work very well. I can't say definitively because I haven't tested it in real life yet, in the real world, and I hope one day it could be. So that's it for militia. And that's actually it so far for the Utopian Realism series. So to go over where we started, I actually first started with the capitalism video. So that was number 2, social economic structure capitalism. That was part 1. And then we went an overview of the homepage. This is what it's looking like at the moment, but I'm sure it will be updated and edited and changed in the future. That's what I like to do, always improve things. We have money. And again, if you have only looked at this video, go back, check out the whole series, understand it all, because it all interconnects and fits together. Nothing will make sense if you're only looking at it. It's like looking at a jigsaw puzzle and you're only looking at one piece and you're going, this doesn't make sense. This one piece, I don't get it. Of course you don't get it. You've got to put it in the jigsaw puzzle. The whole thing. Connect the dots, see the whole picture, and even more than just the Utopian Realism series, all the other videos on my channel about comparing policies to principles, which goes into a lot more detail, obviously, about comparing policies to principles. Public property and services, so we've covered a lot here. There's a lot. And I think this is the shortest version of explaining how a civilizations model, essentially explaining how the human race can interact peacefully, maturely, sensibly, as grown-up bloody adults, and do it for thousands and thousands, if not millions of years. Well, I can't say million, because who knows what's going to happen after hundreds or thousands of years. Oh, that could go into some crazy speculation, but let's keep it down to earth and what we know right now. This is the system. This is the system that if everyone understood it, everyone would be on board, unless you're evil. And not just stupid evil, I mean intelligently evil, and you're a psychopath and you want power and domination over others. You want others to be less than you, then this is the worst possible system for you. But if you are reasonable, rational, even if you're a faith-based moron, and you're not deliberately, psychopathically, intelligently evil, this is the system you want to be living by. This system is for 99, maybe higher than that, % of people in the world. It really is. Especially all those people who do stupid evil, which is unfortunately most people, I believe, in my well-educated opinion. Even for those people, especially for those people, everyone would have a better life in this system. So that's all for now. I'll be definitely making more videos in the future about other topics, intelligence, general intelligence being one of those. A second addition to my intelligence series. I made one video about intelligence in the past. That was really good. A big deep dive into what is intelligence. Yeah, so general intelligence, that'll be next, and I'm just going to keep creating and spreading these fantastic ideas. Okay, stay tuned and spread this around. This is only ever going to get any traction if you give it traction.